Hey everybody, Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with our weekly lecture series. The difference is today's Wednesday and usually my lectures are on Monday. But you know, sometimes things change. I want to thank our sponsor, and I'm going to pronounce their name wrong. It's a family. It's the Zatlukal family. And their name's spelled Z-A-T-L-O-U-K-A-L. So I did my best, but trying is the first step to failure. And they wanted me to do a lecture about a match that was played about 4.5 years ago, maybe it was 5.5 years ago, between AlphaZero and Stockfish. And there's a lot of controversy in this match, and the chess world loves controversy. It's not the controversy we're talking about now, because this match took place in 2018. So, but we could rehash it and talk about some of what's fair and what's not fair and all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm not the world's leading authority on computer chess. And what I mean is, I know more than the average person. I know a lot more than the average person. However, if somebody's into computer chess and talks about AlphaZero and Leela and Stockfish and Shredder, and they talk about it a lot, and they study it a lot, they know more than I do. But I know a little bit, so if you're completely in the dark, I'm your guy. And I'm sure I'll say something wrong, and people on YouTube will leave very nasty comments. So we expect that, so get going, leave those nasty comments. You can even leave them right now. You can do it before you even hear what I have to say. So AlphaZero is not an engine. AlphaZero is AI, just like what came after, which is Leela. AlphaZero's sort of gone now. They did AlphaZero, they won. Now they're doing other stuff. This match is a few years ago, and what took over for AlphaZero is Leela. And Leela, like Stockfish, has people looking at it and trying to improve it all over the world. Stockfish, which is what I use, is free, which I like. And if you want to buy a chess engine and use it with any of your, chess software you have, Stockfish probably the best. But even if it's not the best, it doesn't matter. If Stockfish is 3330 and Shredder's 3340, what does that mean? Okay, so all of these engines, if they played FIDE-rated chess, and the AI, they would all be over 3,000, and some would be way over 3,000. Now, this match, some people thought was unfair. The unfairest thing about it in my mind is that AlphaZero played Stockfish 8. And you might say, Stockfish 8, why did it play Stockfish 8 instead of like what we have now? We have Stockfish 16, we might have Stockfish 17, I think 16, but 17... is probably soon coming. The reason is that Stockfish 16 didn't exist then. This match is a few years ago. So AlphaZero is better than Stockfish 8, although it's arguable whether it was better than Stockfish 9 or 10. And in some cases, some of the games were played taking away Stockfish's opening book. I don't know why they do that. I have no idea why. Some games have the opening book for Stockfish and some don't. Why not just let it use the opening book? So, okay. So the headline is AlphaZero crushes Stockfish in new 1,000 game match. But actually, AlphaZero in 1,000 games scored about 55%. So it was something like 55 to 45%, depending on who you ask. I didn't do the math, but somebody said it was 54%, and somebody said it was 57%. So we'll just go somewhere near the middle, 55%. That's not really crushing. And over 840 games, I think, were drawn. So most of the games were drawn. When I say most, a big plurality of the games were drawn. And this lecture is going to be different than usual. I'm not going to show any whole games because that would take hours. When engines play each other, unlike people, they don't agree to draws and they don't blunder. If you agree to a draw, then the game ends. If you blunder, then you could resign. That doesn't happen in computer matches. So what happens is computer games have a lot of moves in them. A lot. Some computer games are 100 moves, some are 200 moves, and some are more. Because if you're not agreeing to a draw and you're not blundering, the game can just go on. Now, obviously, if it's a draw by repetition, then that happens. Okay, so it didn't really crush. The headline's sort of misleading. Excuse me. Now, it did score, I highlighted here, 155 wins for AlphaZero, 6 wins for Stockfish 8, and 839 draws. Now, if you play somebody 1,000 times, which is, I guess, impossible, and unless you play like 1 minute, and you have 839 draws, you didn't get crushed. And obviously, AlphaZero did better than Stockfish. Some people claim, well, it was Stockfish 8, so that wasn't a good Stockfish. Some people say it didn't have its opening book. That's unfair. So another thing they did, I don't know why they did it, is they played time odds games because the AlphaZero people were like, AlphaZero is better than Stockfish. Okay, they were trash talking. The computers can't trash talk, so the people who program everything have to trash talk. And they were giving it time odds, like 10 minutes to 5, 10 minutes to 3, 10 minutes to 1, 30 minutes to 1. When they played 10 minutes to 1, they said AlphaZero also won the match. It was very close, but even at 10 to 1 odds, AlphaZero won. And they said Stockfish started winning the match when it was 30 minutes to 1. So, okay, AlphaZero is better than Stockfish, in my opinion, but that's Stockfish 8. And AlphaZero's not playing chess anymore, and Stockfish keeps improving. So Stockfish 16 would obviously beat Stockfish 8. At least I hope so. They've analyzed a lot of the games. I can't show you all 1,000 games. I'm sorry. That would be like a 20-day lecture. I could show you all 1,000 games. And there's an article about it on chess.com where this is the article that I'm showing you now, where it explains, you know, with the opening book, without the opening book, and Stockfish 9 came out, why didn't they use Stockfish 9, and so forth. So there's a lot of technical jargon, which I don't understand a lot of it, especially this one. That's funny. I think this is one of the games I want to look at. It's up here. That's weird. I picked 3 of 1,000 games, and I think it's one of them they're showing. Okay, and what they did later was they had later versions of Stockfish analyze the games. So obviously, if computers are analyzing their own games, that doesn't make a lot of sense. If I analyze the game and I'm like, make pronouncements, that move's good, that move's bad, that doesn't make sense because the engines play a lot better than me. If I played 100 games with an engine or AI, I'd probably score like half a point and lose 99.5. I'd get lucky one game with white, maybe. I might score 0, but you never know. Although I know grandmasters who claim if Magnus has white against the engine, he can draw every game. See, I know more than some grandmasters. The answer to that is fries. That's not true. Anyway, it's a long article, and you can see, very interesting, I guess. If you're interested in the computer stuff, why can't I go down more? What happened? This page is unresponsive. Okay, well, the computer doesn't like me talking badly about other computers. Sorry. Okay, now let's go to the games, and these games are very long, especially the last one. And I want to give Stockfish some cred, even though it only won a few games. Most of the games were drawn, and I'm going to show you one of the games that it won, if you can stay awake that long. Now, this is a game that caught my eye because I really like the way the position looks. White's super aggressive. White has the 2 bishops. But if you're good at counting, and I'm not saying you are good at counting, because I know I'm not, White is down 2 pawns. And White doesn't have a forced win. White's just down 2 pawns. But the computers today evaluate space and bishops, and they calculate variations very deeply. And AlphaZero liked its position here. Stockfish 10, which analyzed the games of Stockfish 8, Stockfish 10 said this is equal. Okay, and AlphaZero has white, and from what I gather, and again, I'm not the expert on the subject, but I can look at the games and give my opinion. From what I got, AlphaZero plays more aggressively than Stockfish 8, and AlphaZero is more willing to sacrifice material. So you might get positions where somebody's down a piece and they have good compensation, and half the grandmasters are like, I like down the piece to have this compensation. And the other half are like, no, I like being up a piece, not enough compensation. And I think if the engines were like that and the AI, I think AlphaZero would want to be down a piece and Stockfish would want to be up a piece. That's what I got from looking at their games, that Stockfish 8 likes material more than AlphaZero does. AlphaZero likes to play and play aggressively and get long-lasting attacks that humans can't really understand. I understand if I sack a piece and then I checkmate the guy 5 moves later. I understand that. Okay, but if I sack a piece and then it takes 20 moves to see the compensation, I'm like, I'm not sacking a piece. Maybe I won't get compensation. Okay, but AlphaZero is better than me for some reason. Wonder why that is. Okay, and AlphaZero in this position played the move E5. Okay, that attacks the knight on F6. Then D takes E5. D takes Rook E1. So white sacrifices a third pawn just to open up black's position. And this is what surprised me about the game, is the willingness of AlphaZero to just, here's some pawns, I don't need them. Now, don't try this at home unless you're as good as AlphaZero. If your rating is 3,500, then you can do what you want. But if you're like me and you're not 3,500, you can't just sack your pawns and say, I think I have enough compensation. AlphaZero's judgment is probably better than Stockfish 8 regarding material and counterplay. Okay, so black played the move E4, which keeps the white bishop closed on this diagonal. That's, I think, the problem with taking this, is our bishop on D4 is just too good. So black tries to block it up. Bishop takes E4. Queen F8, getting off of the file of the white rook. Still, black is 2 pawns ahead. Okay, D5. And this is like what I was saying. AlphaZero's like, rawr, attack. And AlphaZero's really good. So a lot of people who are club players, maybe rated 1,000, they play the same way, but they don't calculate 40 moves ahead, so they just lose everything. They don't know when it's good and when it's not good. Grandmasters tend to side on not sacrificing material all the time, because then when you're wrong, you just lose. You're like, well, that didn't work, I'm down a piece. Then if it does work, you have compensation, but it doesn't mean you're winning. Okay, so black played E takes D5. Then bishop to D3. So white just keeps sacking pawns, and white says, look at my good bishops. And Stockfish says, no talking. So how many pawns is black up here? I can't even count that high. 3 pawns up. And white doesn't really have a big threat. If it was white to move, Okay, so Stockfish plays bishop G4, developing its bishop, which I like because it controls the 8th rank, controls the back rank. White never plays F3. White's gone like 1 move without sacrificing a pawn. So every move, white sacrifices a pawn. And I'm like, what? This is why I started from this position. I couldn't understand how white can just give everything away and then win anyway. Okay, so bishop D7 was played. Stockfish 10 says if you take the pawn, rook F1, then white gets good compensation down the F file, which I sort of agree with. Now sacrificing the pawns is a good idea. Now, a friend of mine in Michigan from 35 years ago, whenever somebody would blunder all their pawns, like here he's not blundering, AlphaZero sacrificing pawns, but when people blundered their pawns, he would say, that's okay, you get more open files for your rooks. So even though he was kidding, he was still right. So bishop D7, keeping the F file closed. Queen C3. There's a move I can finally understand. Threatening queen takes knight on F6. Knight h5, which defends the rook, gets off the square that was attacked. Rook e5, I understand that move. White wants to play rook e1 or rook g1 and do some kind of tactical thing over here. And again, if I was white and I was playing a tournament game, I would be like, well, I sacrificed 3 pawns and I have some compensation, but I don't think it's enough. I wouldn't think it's enough. And I would think I have some tricky chances. And AlphaZero says, no, this is good for white. And Stockfish 8 says, I'm up 3 pawns. And so when material is equal and nobody's sacrificing anything, then the engine and the AI typically will analyze the positions the same. They'll say it's about equal, and the games will be 150 move draws, which isn't really interesting for us. However, when there's a material disparity, you have to have good judgment and good calculation. And before, when engines, this is 10, 20, 30 years ago, when engines would calculate positions where material was sacrificed, they had to calculate the compensation and at the end think they had a good position. And AlphaZero says, no, I have a good position, just we'll wait. It's coming. It feels like it's going to be a good position for white, even though it can't calculate all the way to the end. And I think that's one of the advantages the AI like AlphaZero and Leela have over the engines, is they're more willing to give up material for long-term compensation. And this is what perturbed Kasparov when he lost the match to Deep Blue. If you know the game 6, the game that he lost to lose the match, and this is many years ago, he said he was surprised the engine sacrificed a piece for long-term compensation. Even though it was theory, he thought the engines don't do that. Okay, well, he was wrong. So he lost that game. Okay, so c6, defending the pawn on d5, doubling rooks. So white obviously is better, it's just that he's down 3 pawns. But white's pieces are all great. And the bishop on d7 is passive, the rook on a8 is passive, queen is passive. White has a great position, but he's given up 3 pawns for it. Okay, knight f6, bringing the knight back. Queen to d4, just a creeping move. It doesn't threaten anything, it just moves the queen up. Maybe you could argue it threatens this pawn, but that's not why he played it. He's just getting further and further into the position. C takes b5. Now, black is up so many pawns, I'm confused. I was confused earlier, too. Okay, black's up 4 pawns. What else? Bishop b1. Usually when you're down 4 pawns, you're not retreating. And AlphaZero says, no, I have good compensation. This is great. Okay, so it's not the way computers have ever played chess. And I think that's why AlphaZero won the match, because it was better in positions that were like this, where somebody has extra material, and the other person, the other engine AI has compensation. And you have to use judgment, and computers aren't known to have judgment, they calculate. Brute force, they calculate better than I do. When I say better is not the right word. There's no word in the English language to discuss how much better computers analyze than I do. Nothing will suffice to say. Okay, so black played bishop c6, solid. Defending everything. Rook e6, threatening the knight on f6. Rook f7. Rook f7 seems to lose a piece, but I guess black thinks they have enough pawns for a piece, which they do. And white didn't take it. I mean, white played rook g1. White could take, but that would trade everything. And white's up a piece, but black has 4 pawns. And, to be honest, I probably want black here. Black has a lot of pawns for the piece. And white's attack is sort of done. We could play rook e8, for example. It's hard to imagine white will queen any of his pawns, but I could see this h-pawn being dangerous. So black sacrificed a knight, and white ignored it. White's playing for the attack. You can see the bishop on b1, the rook going to g6, and white has tremendous compensation for 4 pawns. Queen G7, defending the knight again and the pawn on G6. Queen takes F4, taking a pawn, and that unleashes the bishop. Now black's only up 3 pawns. That's it. Rook E8. Let's trade. Rook D6. Let's not trade. Knight D7. Both queens are attacked. So I would be really scared to play this move, but I'm not Stockfish. Computers calculate and they figure out that you're not losing material when both queens are hanging. White played Queen C1. Again, it's funny. Computer plays Bishop B1, Queen C1, and White's the one attacking. So computers just play differently than humans. Most humans are like, I'm not going to put my queen on the first rank. I'm trying to get compensation for 3 pawns. And AlphaZero's like, no, I have compensation. Don't worry about it. I can get a good position whenever I want. And I don't need to play super aggressive right now. My position speaks for itself. Okay, that's the Hans Niemann version of AlphaZero. Rook F6, which looks a little crazy. Black doesn't really care about material much. Black cares about beating back the attack. So if White gives up his dark squared bishop, that gets rid of a lot of White's attack. Black just wants to trade pieces. F4, White wants to play F5 and get more attackers into the game. The rook is pinned to the queen. And now, if I had White in a tournament game, now I think I have a lot of compensation for 3 pawns. Things are getting clearer now. Queen E7, unpinning the rook. Rook takes F6. White wants to keep the bishops. White's attacking. White doesn't want to win the exchange. White wants to have this beautiful bishop on the diagonal. That I can understand. Knight takes, and then F5. So black's king looks like it's in a lot of trouble, and even though black is 3 pawns up here, I would definitely take white now. White seems to be crashing through on the king side by ignoring winning back material and just attacking. Queen E3, black wants to trade queens. F takes G6, threatening. G takes A7, double discovered, triple, quadruple check. That looks pretty good. Queen takes C1 was played. G takes H7, it's double check. You're in check by the pawn and the rook. If you play King H8, bishop takes knight is checkmate. So I'm guessing Stockfish didn't play King H8. That's my guess. Hey, what do you know? King F7. Then rook takes C1. Now what's the material? Black's up a pawn, but that pawn's pretty strong, and it's defended by the bishop. Knight takes H7, giving the knight away. And now White's just winning. White's up a piece for 2 pawns. Although I can't really suggest anything good here for black. White's threatening rook F1, which just wins the game immediately. The pawn on H7 is too strong. Even though black was ahead a lot of material, black's bishop was always quite bad. So it's funny, it takes 10, 15, 20 moves, then finally humans like me can see the compensation. Okay, and then the rest of the game should just be easy because white's up a piece. There's annotations to the game, but that's just because Stockfish 10 was mad that his predecessor lost. Yeah, and Grandmasters would resign here, I think, if they were black. I'm not sure if the engines and AI were allowed to resign, or they had to play to checkmate. That would make the game much longer. White's just moving their king up in the endgame. Yeah, this is easily resignable. White's a piece up for nothing. Okay, white did resign here, so they were allowed to resign. Probably there's some threshold. Like if it says +6 or +7, it's like, all right, I give up. So white won that game. That was one of the most amazing games of the match. And that was a 1,000-game match. But what I did is I didn't look at the draws. So, and those games are amazing too. But I just looked at somebody winning. When somebody beats Stockfish, you have to step up and take notice. Or sit up. Whichever is funnier. Okay, now the next 2 games start from the same position. And Stockfish was white in both games. In one game, Stockfish lost. and in one game Stockfish won. The game Stockfish won was about 150 moves. Okay, so very suspicious. All right, so this is the game Stockfish lost. Stockfish has white. This is Stockfish 8, and this is a position you get from the Berlin. If you follow Super Grandmaster chess, you've seen this position many times. And even the engines were playing it. So bishop e7. Black can't castle. Black's already played king takes queen when they traded queens, then back to e8. And that's something in the Berlin that happens to a lot of people when they get to move 20 or 25. They're wondering why black didn't castle the last few moves. And that's because he can't. Once you get to move 8 or 9 in the Berlin, black can't castle anymore. It only looks like they can castle. Okay, so b3. And I think white played differently in the game that they won. Knight h4. Knight takes h4. Bishop takes h4. Let me turn off the annotations so it doesn't look so silly to me. Notation, and then delete all commentary. Yay, that was quick. I'm usually not so fast. Okay, bishop takes h4, and typically in Grandmaster play, a very high percentage of these Berlin games are draws. So both sides just sort of move around, and white has 4-3 on the king side, and eventually wants to get their pawns going. Black's 4-3 isn't as good because black has a doubled pawn. Black makes it harder to get a passed pawn. On the other hand, black has 2 bishops, and black doesn't mind that their king is moved because there's no queens on the board. So there's not really a mating attack. Okay, c3, which I don't think is a good move in the Berlin. I haven't seen white do that. h4, black is gaining space on the king side. Rook d2, rook h5. Putting the rook on h6 or h5 is something humans do a lot in the Berlin because we can't castle and we can't get the rook to d8, so we'll just come out some other way. Now we're threatening the pawn on e5. h3, I guess if you take the pawn on e5, bishop f4 wins this pawn on c7. Now a5, and by the way, there's a joke at top level chess, whenever somebody plays h4, h5, a4, a5, that it's engine approved, because that's the way that engines and AI like to play now. And then we're looking at an engine versus AI, and it's h5, h4, a5. So the rumors are true. Sticking those pawns in the opponent's position can be annoying. And probably before 20 years ago, those moves would have been scoffed at, but now it's normal just to play h4 or a4 for no reason. There is a reason, but people didn't think it was important until the engines kept doing it and winning. Rook e1. It seems like white's just floundering. Why is the rook on e1 behind all its pieces? Bishop e6. f4, finally defending his pawn. a4, black has tremendous pressure here. Black's bishops are looking good. Knight d4. Bishop, save the 2 bishops. Bishop d7. b4, I agree with that. c5, black is trying to use the majority on the queen side. Even though the pawns are doubled, it looks like they're not going to be doubled for long. Takes, takes. Okay, now I definitely like black because black has 2 bishops, and black can make a passed pawn on the queen side later. So I just like black in this position. Knight c2. White says, let's get rid of the 2 bishops. Black says, no. I'm an AI. I like 2 bishops. And Stockfish says, understandable. Rook b1, threatening the b pawn. b6. Knight b4. The knight wants to go to d5 because that's a good square. Bishop e6. Knight goes to c6. That's a nice square. And then a3. Black wants to take this pawn later and make a queen. White plays king h2. That's not a move I would ever consider. If I was going to move my king, I would go to f2. Move it towards the center. King h2, I'm not sure how that helps white. f6, breaking up the pawns in the center. Usually you want the center open and the position open when you have the 2 bishops. Also, black wants to play king f7. Rook e1, seeing that the e-file may soon become open. f5, black says, just kidding. didn't want the e-file open. And this looks like if two grandmasters were playing, this would be a draw probably, because it looks hard for anybody to do anything. But computers, engines, AI, they don't care about that. They'll win the game in 300 moves. That's actually a weakness of a lot of my students and a lot of club players in general, is at some point they get tired, they don't want to play anymore. You've been playing for 3-4 hours, you're like, that's enough. Okay, but engines don't think like that. Engines like, it's my turn. They don't get tired. So knight d4, bishop goes back again. White doesn't do very much. Neither side does very much, they're just waiting. Finally, black kicks the knight out and plays g5. So you can see in both games, and it's a small sample size, AlphaZero is always pushing their pawns. In the game with white, AlphaZero is giving away its pawns, opening the files and diagonals. And here, AlphaZero pushes pawns on both sides of the board, whereas white's pawns are mainly staying at home. And one thing about AlphaZero compared to Stockfish, I think, and this is Stockfish 8, so if you're Stockfish 16, don't write me a nasty letter. I think AlphaZero has more contempt. And in computer language, contempt is you don't necessarily play the best move, you play the move that's most likely to win. And it could be if you play the best move, you get to a position that's drawn, and I know how to draw it. But if you play the second best move, it's also drawn, but I don't know how to draw it. And so AlphaZero likes these crazy positions, I think, more than Stockfish does. Stockfish likes clarity, AlphaZero likes no clarity, and I'm going to outplay you because I understand positions where I'm sacrificing material and it's imbalanced and unbalanced. Knight takes a3, there's a free pawn. g4, threatening g3. AlphaZero doesn't mind sacrificing pawns, although I must say g3 is annoying. So king g1, g3, bishop e3, rook a8. Black just has, better pieces, more things to attack, and black's king can later move up the board when the rooks are off, and this king is sort of trapped back here. So black still has a better position, even though they're down a pawn. Rook h6, the rook gets back into the game. Bishop c1, white just didn't know what to do. b5, again, AlphaZero always pushing all of its pawns. Knight e3, rook a4, putting pressure on the f4 pawn. c4, takes on c4, now material's equal. Knight d5, the knight's active. c3, sacrificing the pawn. It's always sacrificing pawns, it's always pushing them. Now it has a skewer, attacking the knight and the bishop. Bishop d2. Rook c6, the rook goes behind the passed pawn. That's not a move I would think of with my rook on c4. But again, I'm not as good as the computer. And still, white is up a pawn, but it's this pawn. That pawn's not going anywhere. Black has 4 pieces that can block it. So all we care about is the bishop is inactive, and my bishops will get active. That's what AlphaZero cares about. King f1, proving me right. Remember when Stockfish played king h2, and I said I wouldn't do that? Then he played king g1, king f1. See, I'm not as bad as they said I was. You know who said I was bad? All the versions of Stockfish. They're saying Finegold's terrible. Bishop e6, rook b1, rook b4. Even though black's a pawn down, black is playing for the win because black has the bishop pair. Bishop check, king goes back. And they move around. And white's passed pawn is not going to queen. This pawn could get dangerous soon. Knight d5, rook b2. Black's rook is penetrated. Bishop c3, black wins the pawn back. White tries to trade everything, which would lead to a draw. But now our passed pawn is much stronger than this passed pawn, which is blocked. Also, we could play bishop e4 and block the rook from the passed pawn. Knight f6 check, king d8. Black always wants to keep the 2 bishops. Black tries to infiltrate with the rook and the bishops. And again, it seems like sacrificing material for long-term gain is something AlphaZero is better at than Stockfish 8 was. King H1, that's a sorry move. Bishop C5, and in this position, white resigned. Because the king is trapped on H1, this pawn's too strong, and white doesn't have any counter chances with the bishop here and the rook coming here. In fact, if we trade off bishops and trade off rooks, black should just win easily because this king is trapped forever. This king can never get out. So in this position, both computers evaluated it as a very high plus for black, and so white resigned. That was very similar to the last game because AlphaZero kept sacrificing pawns to get two bishops, to get active play, to get aggressive play, and it understood the positions better than Stockfish 8 did. And this kind of pawn structure here, when your king is here, you can't do that. My king's free to go wherever it wants, and your king's stuck on H1. The C pawn is going to decide the game, so white resigned. Now, obviously, if two club players are playing here, nobody's resigning. But these are rated over 3,300, so they calculate 10, 15, 20 moves ahead, and they're like, uh-oh, this isn't good. This pawn's going to queen, going to get back rank mated, king's going to walk up, and my king can go to G1 and H1, and I'm trapped. So they realize in a few moves, black is either going to do a back rank check, is going to push their pawn to the end, or if the bishop moves away, bishop E3, and I'll win these pawns. So white resigned. Okay, the last game, which may take hours to show you, this is the same position. We just looked at this. Stockfish is white again, but I didn't want to be a hater. I don't want to say like Stockfish always loses to AlphaZero. Okay, this is a game Stockfish 8 won, and this game took over 140 moves. Okay, so it's hard to beat AlphaZero. Okay, so knight e4. In the previous game that we looked at, Stockfish 8 played b3. So knight e4, a new idea. Bishop e6. Wait, let me get rid of that. I like getting rid of stuff. Okay, that'll make things go quicker. Okay, king e8, knight e4. So we saw this position in the last game. Bishop e6, now b3, b6, h3, rook to d8. Again, this looks pretty equal. Bishop b2. Again, black plays h5. If you look at a lot of games in the Berlin, you'll notice black plays h5 a lot, trying to prevent white from pushing their pawns forward and getting a big advantage on the king side. If you're able to play g4, kicking the knight, and then f4, f5, white's already close to winning. Traded the rooks, rook d1, h4. That stops white's pawns from moving forward. That's a big advantage for black, I think, to get their pawn to h4. And it's hard to move these pawns, but somehow Stockfish 8 came through this game. Knight h2, knight can go to g4. We can play f4, c5, c4, a5, knight c3. And this position, black's rook isn't getting active, and my knight has squares to go to. My other knight can go to g4 or f1 or f3, or I can play f4. So white has some possibilities here that they didn't have in the first game we looked at. Rook h5 still. King f1, that's why Stockfish won. So that king h2, then go back. Bishop d7. Never play f3. The knight retreats. And now white's pieces actually look pretty good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, black's bishops aren't very scary when the bishop's on d8. So strategically, in this game, Stockfish is outplaying AlphaZero. When AlphaZero gets an open game for the bishops and sacrifices pawns and gets active play, that's when Stockfish 8 doesn't do as well. But this game, black sacrificed nothing. Black doesn't really have any active play. Bishop g5, The knight wants to go to e4. That's a great square for the knight. And you can see AlphaZero doesn't have a good plan. Bishop g5, bishop d8. Knight d3. That surprises me. I thought he was going to e4. Knight e3. Rook has to go away. Bishop c3. Putting everything on the third rank. And these moves don't do much, but you can see AlphaZero has no idea what to do to improve its position. So it's just moving back and forth. And white isn't doing much either, so black is happy. Finally, white got f4 in. Now white wants to play f5 soon. White's just repeating. Black doesn't repeat because it has more contempt. Maybe Stockfish wanted to draw and evaluated this as equal or slightly worse, and AlphaZero never wants to draw because it's like, I'm AlphaZero. Who can draw me? So g6, stopping f5. They move around a lot again. Knight c1, knight e2, just a lot of maneuvering. Nobody's doing very much. Finally, the knights get to the best squares, d5 and e4. AlphaZero wants to open it up, plays a4. Looks like all the pieces are on the right squares for both sides. And finally, Stockfish does something, b4. Okay, that threatens the c5 pawn several times. So black has to do something about that. Takes, knight takes, knight back to d5. And here comes white's king, not sure where it's going. So here black could have claimed to draw with knight f5, but black played rook e6 because AlphaZero has more contempt. Never wants to draw. Always thinks the opponent's terrible. And I must say, AlphaZero is better than everybody else, so can't really argue with him. Rook d3. And AlphaZero plays for the win, a3. Maybe this pawn will queen. Maybe white will take it. And then again it plays for the win, rook c6. Nothing's happening, nothing's happening, nothing's happening. And then AlphaZero's like, no, I don't want to draw. I'm not going to repeat 3 times. And Stockfish is like, fine, I'll just go take your pawn. Now b5 is a crazy move, opening up the position, letting the knight come in. And they repeat again. And again, they can draw, but black plays for the win. I feel bad for AlphaZero. It really tried hard to win this game, but it ended up backfiring. But again, they don't blunder the engines, so this kind of game is usually a 150 move draw. It's not normal that they play a long game like this without any crazy tactics and somebody wins. But of course, if AlphaZero was like a draw is okay, it could have repeated the position 3 times, already 3 times. Even here it could have played bishop a6 check, but it just doesn't want to draw. Okay, we have piece trade. The a3 pawn is a goner. There's no way that black could save it. So now white's just a pawn ahead. White has a better king. And white has a passed a pawn, which is obviously better than this pawn. That pawn's not going anywhere. See, if I was playing a blitz game, I would never play that because I would think I'm getting checkmated. Now this game, both sides have 3 hours. And Stockfish can calculate 20 moves ahead, so it knows it's not getting checkmated. Looks like black is still playing for a win, even though black is in trouble. Black never repeats because black's trying to win for some reason, which leads to it losing. If AlphaZero thinks it's a draw, it's not going to make a repetition. It's going to keep playing. If it thought it was losing without repeating, that's different. But AlphaZero must think this is still a draw. And these games never end because they never agree to a draw and they never make one-move blunders, which humans do all the time. G4, wow, what a move. And the game goes on. No 50 move rule. Now white plays for the win. White doesn't repeat. Looks like white could take another pawn. But if I take the H pawn, then we lose our A pawn. But maybe later this pawn's going to fall. Now that's a funny move. A human would never play rook A1 because the rook is pinning the bishop to the rook. So a human would never like alleviate that pin. But AlphaZero is like, I can't lose. I can't win if I don't move my rook. So it's still playing for the win, even though it's a pawn down and worse. Like black can never win this position. Okay, white sacrifices their pawn, which is a surprise to me. Oh, and then wants to win this pawn. Okay, that makes sense. So it's just a trade of pawns. Now white will try to get it past H pawn, I guess. So the rook and the bishop and pawn ending might be winning because this pawn's so strong. I can push my pawn to H8. Yeah, that's what black thought also. Now black could take this pawn, but decided to play king to B5 instead, which puzzles me. Is it because of rook E3? King F4? Probably, this is just my own analysis, probably king F4, the rook wants to stay on this pawn, and then H4, H5, H6, H7, H8. That could be the reason why it didn't like taking the pawn right away. King B4. This looks like it should be a draw, although white is a pawn ahead. Okay, white's playing the right plan. Now, if I was black, I would be thinking to take this and then play bishop F5 so I can stop the H pawn from queening. Although this gives white 3 pretty strong pawns, so that's probably the wrong idea. But I'm worried to have black in this position after H6 because my bishop can't stop the pawn, but my rook can. That's asking a lot from the rook. Now the rook can't move. So black can't move here. Black can't move his rook. And black is just saying, I'm going to move around here and draw. But I guess white zugzwanged the engine. Yep, won the pawn. And then 1,000 moves later, it's going to win. It seems like it's unstoppable that white gets the bishop on this diagonal and then plays bishop G7. After bishop F8, if you take it, I play H8. Yeah, I was right. And after over 140 moves, black resigned because bishop F8, bishop G7. And if you take the bishop on F8, I just queen. So that was an amazing game. What's amazing about it is AlphaZero is like no draw, no draw, no draw. And after not drawing 3 or 4 times in a row, and several times it could have played better, it's just playing for the win. It's like this draws, so I'm going to play this move because I don't know what's going to happen. And didn't see it was losing. Then when the pawn gets to H6, it's pretty clear that white's winning. So that was unfortunate for AlphaZero, but Stockfish wins. And a lot of the wins in computer games last this long or longer. As I said, there's no blunders and there's no draw offers, so the games just never end. And the computers play so well that in this match, like 840 games were drawn out of 1,000. So my advice to you is look at computer games and be in awe, but don't play computers. Don't do that. No, because then you'll realize how bad you are, and then you won't want to play chess anymore. Like if you play your friend and your friend's better than you, maybe they beat you 7-3. If you play like Stockfish 16 or Leela and you play 100 games, you're going to get 0. So don't do that. That's no fun. Anyway, I enjoyed this lecture. I like looking at these computer games because they're fascinating. It looks like Stockfish 8 was as good as AlphaZero, when it was like a boring closed position, but it was when it was wild and crazy and pawns were getting sacrificed and attacks were happening, it looks like AlphaZero was the better competitor. I want to thank the Zalukal family, Zatlukal, sorry if I mispronounced it, for sponsoring the lecture. If you want to sponsor a lecture, contact my wife Karen at atlchessclub.com, and we'll hook you up with almost anything you can think of. Almost anything. Thanks for watching the lecture, everybody. See you guys next time. Bye.